My name is Jonathan Bradford. I'm the retired president and chief executive officer of ICCF, the Intercity Christian Federation. I think the first thing that I want to say about Carlos and his impact on the industry is that he brought a sort of fusion of public policy and sensitivity to human need. He is nothing if he's not also very adept at public policy, understanding what's going on in the field of housing. That means housing development, housing finance, housing support services. So not just a policy, sort of a technician, if you will, but somebody who took great care to integrate housing policy with the distinct and certain human need. In other words, where the rubber meets the road, Carlos made sure it was successful. Carlos came in not as a bureaucrat, technical specialist, but as with a fierce dedication to having a housing commission that really made a difference in the community. I won't remember all of the fine print numbers, but in the 33 or 34 years that he was in his position, he grew the organization in terms of the number of housing units that it operates, rental housing units. He added home ownership opportunities as financing was available. The staffing greatly expanded. So I remember thinking and writing in the nomination process that when Carlos got to the Housing Commission, it was a following organization. But when he left it, it is a leading organization. That's important. Somebody who understands how to empower its staff and how to serve its clients respectfully goes from a sort of a follower, a nondescript box checker, to a creative problem solver worth emulating, worth modeling other things after. That's what Carlos did. There's a couple of things that come to my mind about Carlos and his actual performance. One is his interest in homelessness, particularly family homelessness, and his tremendous willingness to learn from others. The organization that I was with did an emergency shelter for homeless families. It was a particular design and program structure that we found to be effective. And he was so pleased with it that the Housing Commission took it, did it on a larger scale, and continues to be very effective. Another very important story in the history of Carlos has to do with the Grand Rapids Housing Trust Fund. We all know that housing is very expensive. Often, in order for it to be affordable, there has to be some gap-filling money. That means loans that don't have to be paid back, grants, and so forth. Along with others here in Grand Rapids, Carlos was very instrumental in gaining the approval of the Grand Rapids City Commission for the creation of this Housing Trust Fund that will go on for many, many years as a source of gap-filling revenue for the actual creation of affordable housing units.
My name is Denny Sturdivant. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Dwelling Place of Grand Rapids. I think Carlos has had a big impact on the housing industry, especially locally, but I think even at the state and national level because of the many different roles and hats he's worn as a director of the Grand Rapids Housing Commission. Terry Duvernay, who I knew a little bit, not real well, but the time that I did know him, had exhibited a lot of leadership traits that I think Carlos has as well, and most of the folks that have received this award have shared. He was one of the first people that came to me and began looking at how the Housing Authority could be of benefit to Dwelling Place. When I inherited this organization, when I came here, it was struggling financially. It was in such bad shape that the board asked for United Way to convene a group of community leaders to look at how to kind of reorganize, restructure, save the organization. Carlos was one of the people who volunteered to step into that kind of role and really was a leader for all of these community folks that were part of that because of his expertise in housing. He offered to step in. We had a welfare hotel, an old welfare hotel on Division Avenue 86 rooms that we were taking welfare checks for. That's how it was being paid for, renting by the week or the month. That was struggling financially and really creating a major financial burden on the organization. Carlos stepped in with the capacity that the Housing Authority had and actually offered to go and apply for a HUD Section 8 rent assistance contract for all 86 units, which not only took a big burden off a dwelling place in terms of the covering the cost of operating it, but also benefited the residents that were living there, many of them were very, very poor, formerly homeless, because they no longer had to pay, they only had to pay 30% of their income for rent. So for dwelling place, that took a big load off of us financially with his willingness to do that. The other thing that happened as a consequence of that is the Dwelling Place Inn was able to apply for low-income housing tax credits. And it was, at that time, it was one of the first allocations of low-income housing credits in the state. Couldn't have happened without the Section 8 contract that Carlos stepped in to apply for. And today, that project is now called Vern-Berry Place. It actually is old enough, it was re-syndicated, and with new tax credits, it's now 116 units, went from 86 to 116 units in a new building. And it won, in 2007, it won a national award for the best urban low-income housing tax credit project in the nation, the Charles Edson Award. I think the innovation that Carlos demonstrated throughout his career and work was really another one of those leadership traits that we saw with Terry. And then so the award's named after Terry, but all of us as recipients of that award really hope that we come just a little ways close to aspiring to be and do something like Terry was for the state of Michigan. Terry had a saying, and some of his very close friends often repeat this, but when you're doing this kind of work, sometimes it can be really frustrating and it can be really challenging, and you wonder sometimes why you're doing it. And when Terry would hear his colleagues talk like that, he would always stop and remind them that to remember that this is about the people, and the work what we're doing is really, really important. And I think Carlos is an example of someone who really took that to heart throughout his career, and his participation and engagement, not only in the housing industry, but in all kinds of other ways, on hospital boards and so on and so forth. Carlos really took that to heart in the work that he did at the Housing Authority and the roles that he played in the community where he lived.
My name is Carlos Sanchez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Grand Rapids Housing Commission, and I retired this last September. Well, I was pretty excited when I got the call, and the reason was that I knew Terry back when I first started working, when he worked for MISHDA and then when he worked for HUD. Back then, there was not a lot of nonprofits working in affordable housing, but Terry was real instrumental in capacity building, helping housing commissions and nonprofits work and partner together. And also back, tax credits were fairly new, and a lot of states were not utilizing their credits. There were not a lot of developers out there that understood the credits and investors that would be purchasing the credits. But Terry was able to be instrumental, and he would figure out ways to partner people together to make things work. So it was always very instrumental for what Terry had done back in the day. Now you go to the Affordable Housing Conference, and there's hundreds of nonprofits that probably can credit Terry Duvernay for them getting involved in affordable housing. So we started off with about 1,100 units. By the time I retired this last September, we hit over 4,700 units. It's been an exciting ride, to say the least. Things were real challenging. One, because I already mentioned, people were just not understanding the way financing worked. You had to take risk, but when you got the right people together, things could happen. And then over the years, I had the pleasure of, working with housing commissions and nonprofits all over the state and the country, and kind of help them figure things out and get them started. And so it was always interesting to see what other people were doing and how we could, translate that here and all over the state. And so I really enjoyed doing that. And the one nice thing I always had is we would have an annual meeting. And one day we were at the Eberhard Center having a luncheon there, and we were talking about the Housing Commission's annual report and what we had done, and we had a lot of our nonprofits there. And I had this, one of the servers come up to me and thanked me because she had lived at one of my facilities. It was a homeless shelter for women, and that she had graduated and was going to school and was finally getting ready to buy her first home. And so when I got that, it was like really encouraging to know that as the Housing Commission, we were impacting people. And she didn't come over, she came over really quietly, and I remember the mayor was sitting next to me at the time, so he heard some of that, and he was pleased to see how it impacted some families. So with that, I always got encouraged that as difficult as things are, we were definitely positively impacting families. Just the fact that they went from homelessness to home ownership was a real rewarding experience for us. There's a lot of folks that I could thank for how my career has been over the 37 years as a director, but particularly when you start thanking folks, obviously you start missing folks, but the Housing Commission Board was always one that I was appreciative of, and the City Commission and those to allow me to take the risky developments and make them work. But in the community, there's so many nonprofits and so many supportive service agencies out there that have come to the rescue of our families, if you will. I was always appreciative of all their abilities to come together and help our residents. I'd have to thank a lot of the agencies around town that have helped us. And at MSHDA, Gary Heidel, I've known him for years and worked with him on a lot of issues at the state level. We have to thank MSHDA for, they helped us pass legislation to change the Housing Act for housing authorities. All the housing commissions around the country, I've always been in awe with how even a small housing commission can do everything that HUD throws at them. And I always, had a great appreciation for some of these agencies that had to, go through that stuff. So, but yeah, I always, all the mayors that I worked with over the years were all supportive, and that's always important. So HUD, MSHDA, all of them have been real helpful to us, and I have to say thanks for all the years of providing us the bucks that we needed to do what we needed to do. But I really have enjoyed, and I continue to work now, helping others to do some of the things that I've done over the years. It's always gratifying to see people finally, their light bulb kicking on and saying, yeah, this will work for us.